Well, Big Island Lake Cree Nation is the latest First Nation community to experience gun violence. On December 30th, one person died and 3 others were injured in a shooting. And just days later, multiple homes in that community were struck with bullets. RCMP are still investigating, and so far, no arrests have been made. Meanwhile, people in that community are trying to figure out what can be done to make their community safer. And it's a question other First Nation communities are grappling with as well. I'm Nicole Huck, and today on Blue Sky, we'll connect with the James Smith Cree Nation and the File Hills First Nations Police Service. We'll hear from the RCMP, and we'll learn about efforts to expand Indigenous policing in this province. If you live in a First Nation community, do you have your own security group? What do you see as the value of First Nation communities having their own police forces? You can call right now. That's 1-800-716-2221, or you can email bluesky@cbc.ca. The struggles on Big Island Lake Cree Nation with drug use and gangs is not unique to that community. It's something other First Nation communities are struggling with as well. And one of the proposed solutions is to have First Nation-led policing in communities across this province. Today, we're taking you to the James Smith Cree Nation. In September of 2022, that community was home to one of the deadliest massacres in Canada's history. Miles Sanderson, who had returned to that community days earlier to sell cocaine, killed 11 people and injured 17 others in a mass stabbing attack on the First Nation and in Weldon. In the wake of that tragedy, the community has been working to establish their own police service. Eddie Head is the Justice and Policing Director for James Smith Cree Nation. He's in our Saskatoon studio. Eddie, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. And we can't talk about First Nations policing without including File Hills First Nation Police Service. That police force was formed in 2002 to provide dedicated policing services to 5 First Nation communities. It remains Saskatchewan's first self-administered standalone police service. Dean Leroy has been chief of the police force for the past 3 months, but he's not new to policing. Before this role, he was a former staff sergeant with the RCMP. He's been and was with the force for 28 years. Chief Leroy, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you.
Eddie, I'd like to start with you. Before 2002, what kind of security did you have in your community on James Smith?
Absolutely none.
It took officers 38 minutes to arrive on the scene after that first call was made on September 4th. If something was to happen in your community today, and what would happen?
Something was happening today. We started out with 28 peace officers back in James Smith. That started in early October, and they came into light as to what had happened a month before that, and it really gave the First Nations. Protection, where they were known at the fact that there was security that was involved within our First Nation.
So if I came onto James Smith Cree Nation right now, what would I see when it comes to security? Who would greet me?
You'll probably see our peace officers are there because they recognize the new vehicles that come onto our First Nations, and they're attached to the main intersections of our community.
How many vehicles or how many people?
Right now, we just did a cutback because of the funding that we received from the federal government. We end up with 14 peace officers full-time, and they're run 24/7.
And is that 14 on at a time, or how many people would be on at a time?
We run 7 to a shift.
7 to a shift.
Yes.
And what do they do?
What they do is they patrol and they watch out for strange vehicles. And we, as you mentioned, that we have our share of people that come onto reserve and selling drugs. Vice versa, we have our own people that are selling as well. So we really keep a close eye, and we work closely with our local detachment of Melfort Detachment, RCMP.
What can the security officers do? Can they, or what limitations, I guess, do they have?
Just patrol, making sure that if if the safety of the community, if there is a call that goes into the RCMP and says there's a family dispute, and we're there to see if we can de-escalate the problem, and we make sure that everybody's safe. And if it beyond our control, we notify the RCMP that we need you out there.
And do they carry guns?
Not the peace officers are not trained to carry guns or in that or as a role as peace officers.
Can you give an example of how you've seen it be helpful? Do you have any examples of de-escalating or something that kind of illustrates what they're doing?
Well, good example for what we have had to deal with a couple of times, and it was I think it was a 911 call that went into Regina, and we were notified as well from the call. It was a family of 3 children, and man and wife, and the man was going to take his children and his wife, and take his own life. And with the assistance of our peace officers, we were able to maintain control of the situation until everybody got there with the RCMP and the paramedics, and we as the 911 dispatcher in Regina was on a line right throughout, and it was pretty intense. The young gentleman was on high drugs and whatever he was on. He wasn't in his state of mind, but he was willing to take his own family.
Did the person who, I imagine, how big is James Smith Cree Nation? Would the peace officers kind of know everybody?
That's the biggest, the really advantage we have is that our peace officers are from our First Nation, and they know our membership. So when it comes to a situation, they're able to just to speak to the I guess our relatives that are in trouble within our First Nation.
I mean, we do hear, unfortunately, too often about situations where someone's having a mental health crisis and it escalates and someone ends up getting shot. That can't be the case if people aren't carrying guns. Do you find that it's just that relationship that's able to help, and do you think it's important that people aren't carrying guns so things can't escalate?
Well, that's the thing about it is we had an incident where there was a truck that came from Alberta, and a Halfton was parked in our schoolyard, and when our peace officers approached the 2 individuals, they said they were there to come to a wake service, funeral service, and the peace officers backed away, took the license plate, and called the RCMP, and they were notified, and they reported that that vehicle was stolen out of Alberta. And then they just watched from the distance, knowing that the school was still shut down, and the vehicle took off west of the First Nation, and the RCMP were able to apprehend the vehicle about 8 miles from west of the First Nation. And our peace officers continued that pursuit is because they support of our RCMP, and they quickly ran the vehicle into a bush, and our police officers were able to block off the area so the RCMP could bring in their staff with the dogs, and they did apprehend the two individuals, and there was guns and there was drugs that were in the vehicle. So that's a really good example on that, and there's an ongoing case right now that I can't really speak of, that of a charge that's been placed right now with one of our band members as well.
So you said that there's 14 people working. That's not free. Where does the funding come from for this?
It comes from different programs that under public safety, but it's not. it's not enough to carry a full force in that. And what we're looking for with with Canada is as revenue is through funding agencies at essential services. Essential services is what we're dealing with right now, is because it is a public safety, and the OPP chiefs of police and the Ontario chiefs have filed a lawsuit against Canada for public safety in that format, and I think it's. But it also speaks about what the Auditor General spoke about, has been harping for the last couple of years, is the CTAs and the FTAs that are funded through First Nations, where each of the local RCMP detachments have used our numbers to bring in officers, and those officers are supposed to be onto our First Nation at 80% of their time, but we don't get that, even though our numbers are there. The Auditor General spoke about that this past summer, again, ratifying that. Where is that funding going? Why is that funding staying with the RCMP within the detachment area, and not enough time? But having said that, the RCMP themselves are sort of their own officers. Every officer in Canada and in Saskatchewan here, they're very short as to the mandate that they have to fulfill. They are short themselves, so how could they give so much time to each of our First Nations? So that's where the essential services come in. That's what we talk about.
Well, we will speak with Saskatchewan RCMP coming up a little bit later in the show, so I'm glad that you brought that up right now. And before we move into our next guest, I just want to ask, how close are you to establishing? I know the goal is to establish your own police force on reserve. How close are you to being able to do that?
We're nowhere close as to where you have to be. Many of the First Nations across Saskatchewan and Canada, they've taken anywhere between 25 to 30 years to get really established. For example, here, the Missinaibi First Nation out of Thunder Bay, they have 32 First Nations in their territory, and they just signed a long-term agreement with OPP and Canada on December 12th of 25, and what they've came that long route of well over 27 years in order for them to be established. So it's a long term, and I think Dean can speak to us.
Yeah, it does feel like a good time to bring Chief Dean Leroy in. He's with the File Hills First Nation Police Service. Chief Leroy, you've been operating the longest in this province, and your police provides policing for First Nation communities in Treaty 4, including Okonees, Papikasis, Carry the Kettle, Star Blanket, and Little Black Bear. What does policing look like in these communities?
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Yeah. Well, afternoon. Yeah, I worked pretty late last night, so it's morning to me right now.
You bet.
It's Wild Hills First Nations Police Service is one of the very unique standalone police service here in Saskatchewan. We're as you mentioned, we look after 5 of the 74 First Nations in Saskatchewan here, and we're well on our way to having that credibility of being that standalone police service that will be the envy of a lot of police services as we go forth. We're currently looking at expanding as we go in the next few years here, and having that uniqueness. That covers the special constables that we have. Special constables are essentially the community safety officers that Eddie was mentioning that they have in their nation, and we work hand in hand with our police service. Our police service consists of 15 officers, including 10 regular members and 5 special constables. So those special constables and our officers work hand in hand. So it's vital that we do our policing with the communities that we serve. We work very closely with the community justice committees, the elder groups, the cultural leaders, and no, it just amazes me of the collaboration that we have and how we work closely together. The restorative justice is another example of how we combine forces to.
Can you give an
make our
example
communities-
of the restorative justice that you're thinking about right now?
Sure. Yeah, I'll give you just a quick example. We just did there last month. We had a great meeting with one of the local nations. Just for privacy reasons, I'm not going to get into the nation, but they identified a problem in their community of drug trafficking due to the nature of that everyone was related to the certain drug trafficker that was identified. So they, I guess, were trying to do of what options do they have. There's the operational side of things of doing a drug search warrant and kicking in the door and arresting and charging, and it was kind of an intervention without having the suspect there to hear. But at the end of the day, we came up with solutions that the chief and council were going to approach this individual and have a chat, discuss options that did involve policing, and if that didn't work, then we were going to start doing the enforcement action part of it. So to me, it was an incredible work together, and the solution so far is so good. That individual has stopped what he was doing, and the community members are all happy with the outcome thus far.
You have to keep us posted on that one, because it feels like a good playbook.
Yeah, it does. And that's kind of you go back to the simple formats of restorative justice. When I was a young constable, having someone that threw a rock through a window, and young person, we had a sentencing circle, and all the elders were given a piece of their mind, and he ended up crying and saying he was sorry. And then, this part of his punishment was, he was a good hockey player, so he was going to teach a couple of young people how to skate and play hockey. So those types of things you can have it in a bigger format, a more serious format. But they all work. It's better than sending someone to jail or having a criminal record, and then they go down that dark path.
And right now, I'm speaking with Chief Leroy from File Hills First Nation Police Service. It's a real success story here in Saskatchewan. It's been a long-standing self-administered police service. And Chief Leroy, what I'm interested in is your perspective, because you came from the RCMP. How different is the policing that you see with the 5 communities under File Hills? How different is it from the policing you saw under the RCMP?
Well, there was certain aspects of the RCMP where, when I was in charge of Pelican Narrows a few years ago, we developed a close relationship prior to identifying some of the issues. I arrived there in 2017. The community had 2 or 3 years where they had 2 or 3 murders each year, and it was there was drugs, there was gangs, alcoholism. All these things played into a part of the youth forming up in these little gangs and cliques, and we worked really closely with. They were establishing at that time. There were peacekeepers getting the community safety officer training, the CSO training, and our detachment at that time were instrumental in training the security, the peacekeepers into getting that requirements that they needed for taking notes, use of force. The CSO is under Saskatchewan, They have the training that's you know, use of force for batons, pepper spray, handcuffing, no firearms, and so we work closely with them, and we went from, like I said, 2 or 3 murders a year down to 0. Our serious crime went down drastically, and what we did was we teamed up every night. We talked about what was going on in the community, if there was anybody that was wanted, or if there was any violent crime that happened in a week, just to be on the lookout for. So these are the things that were unique with our police services. We have those relationships and our special constables built into our police service. So if a First Nation has banned bylaws or BCRs, we work with the bands, with the nations, and what their uniqueness is of what they have that they want to address. So our constables and our special constables work with our nations to address, if they have programs they want done in the schools, if there's a pay weekend where we expect a higher call volume of calls, we're going to strategically schedule our peace officers, our special constables with our regular members to allow for more visibility. And from this, all these special constables are from each one of our nations that we police, so they have the awareness of who's who in the community. If there's certain vehicles that are known to be, drug trafficking couriers, we work with the security in each individual nation is combined with our specials and stuff like that. So it really combats the
Yeah,
the
I
drug
could see that
trafficking.
being two sides of that coin. And Eddie, I want to bring you in as well, because when people do know everybody, I imagine it's pretty tricky if somebody who's committing the crime is your cousin or your friend that you went to school with or whatnot. We've talked about the benefit of people being able to maybe talk people down because they know them. But is it tricky to get people to want to sign up for these jobs when you might be kind of being the snitch on some of your family or friends?
Not really, because when you live a good life at a First Nation, you gain that respect. But when you don't live that life, you're disrespectful to our First Nation members, and it's easy to deal with them, and that's what we always continue to do. There is that gray area in life that we as First Nation have to deal with, but it is us that within our First Nation communities that can deal with that properly, and we've done likewise, as what Dean was talking about. We've brought in people that were in a situation of moving drugs, and they're dealing with their situation, their problems, and we also have their parents and grandparents be with them, and I think that's the advantage you got with peace officers within these communities. I can see the relationship in better safety within the program with the COSOs, the marshals, and the RCMPs within each of our First Nations. And as Dean mentioned, if you work together at that local level like that, we're going to succeed a lot stronger. The concern I have long term is was with the RCMP renewal, the expired date of 2032, where the RCMP contract runs out in Canada. And I think that I'm a little concerned about that is because the RCMP is a long history of Canada, but also a long history of our treaties that we signed back in the day. The RCMP was a Queen's Men's back in those days. And I think that we respect that, and I think I look at that as a goal that we need to understand what is happening. But I understand many of the policing organizations across Canada, even Dean just mentioned it, is that the shortage of peace officers, RCMP.
Well, let's ask the RCMP about that because Superintendent Amber Clark is an officer in charge of Operations Safety Branch with the Saskatchewan RCMP. She's been listening along to the program. Superintendent Clark, welcome to Blue Sky.
Thank you.
So you've just been hearing Eddie Head from James Smith Cree Nation speaking. He's over the course of the show, he's brought up the importance of the RCMP and also some of the struggles because, there's just not enough maybe police officers available for the giant province that we have. What's your take on, I guess, maybe just staffing levels and if you're able to properly serve First Nation communities?
Certainly, and I really appreciate the comments of both Dean and Eddie. I've been listening from the onset of this radio interview. So I would say, yes, there's challenges 100% with resourcing across the province, but the RCMP in Saskatchewan isn't unique to enforcement agencies across Canada and internationally and recruiting individuals that are interested in policing and enforcement as a profession. So there's certainly challenges. I would even say there's a worker shortage in other industry as well across Canada.
Do you feel like, I know that, even in the fall, there was criticism that sometimes it would take an hour for RCMP to respond to calls. And that was the Meadow Lake Tribal Council at that time raising concerns. Is that an outlier, the hour long, or what kind of time can people generally expect to see officers after a call is made in an emergency?
Certainly. It's hard to speculate, based on what the call may be that's come in for service. And unfortunately, we don't have officers everywhere in every single community on every street corner within the province. But we do our very best to prioritize calls for service based on severity and dispatch officers extremely quickly from our operational communication center here in headquarters in Regina and do our best to reallocate specialized policing such as our crime reduction teams, warrant enforcement teams, traffic services to support our frontline members out there as well.
And how often are you working with local security teams? How many is that common for First Nation communities to have a local security team that, in Eddie's case, they see something suspicious, they write down a license plate number, they call it in? Is that something that you're seeing a lot of?
We're seeing more and more of it, and I got to say it's invaluable to us. The relationships that we're forging with our Indigenous communities and other communities throughout Saskatchewan as well that are, leveraging different programs like security, like community safety officers is another provincial program that's available. Our relationships are strong with these agencies, and we really work well together and share information. And we've had several situations where our security teams, on James Smith or Sweetgrass First Nation have actually been able to kind of lock down prolific offenders that are out on warrants for us, where specific addresses on First Nations, and redirect our members to those areas and successfully apprehend these individuals. So I would say, it's a super positive relationship, and we really hope that it continues.
We have a caller on the line. We have Dwayne in Carrot River. Dwayne, go ahead.
Yes, considering the isolation of a lot of these Native communities, it seems to me that these special constables on the reserves are essential. And I'm just wondering if someone could tell me what the cost is of putting one of those people in the field for a year, and who would pay for that. But it just seems to me in the last couple of times that we've had some terrible incidents happen on some reserves. One of the complaints, again, as you mentioned, was it took such a long time for the RCMP to get there. And that's not surprising if they're hundreds of miles away. Anyway, I just wondered what it would cost and to put them on and who would pay for it.
So I don't know if Eddie or Chief Lara, if you have a sense of that. Maybe, Eddie, do you? Can you answer that one?
Yes, I can partially answer it, and Dean can probably speak to it as well. Yeah, it is true, and it is That's the issue that we were faced with, and that's why we say to the government of the day, the essential services that will include the peace officers that we have in our First Nations. We're not saying that we eliminate the RCMP or the CSOs or the marshals. They all play a key role in public safety. Because realistically, like say for example, if there was a bad accident that happened on a highway or a homicide that happened in a community, the RCMP person detachment has to leave an officer tied up there, and that could run 24 hours, 12 hours. Well, they're already short as it is, and what happens is that they take away that manpower. But when we work together with the four institutions I speak of, those things come into line with each other, meaning that we'll support each other. So, for example, when we, we speak about, is that we locked down a area where we knew there was a wanted person in that house, and we made sure that he or she was in that house, and we didn't let that person leave from that house where we had the RCMP, and the RCMP had to do make sure the warrant was in order for them to access that house, and that takes a while. A warrant for a convicted convict, a person that's wanted, it takes a while. So, but we were able to do that, and that person he was wanted across Saskatchewan, so we were able to assist in that, and that's a good. I love the comment from the outside there.
And just to Dwayne's point, he was asking also about cost. Between the two of you, I'm not sure, but how much does a peace officer make in your community?
My peace officer will probably make anywhere between 65 to about 75.
So it's an annual salary. It's not a
it's exact annual salary. Yeah, but you think about just a question to the general public, like it costs more money to house a prisoner in the institution than an officer doing his job, a peace officer doing his job in the community, and that's something that we look at and say if we can work with that individuals or people that are into that, we're going to succeed.
And prevention, as Chief Lara was speaking with in his example.
Exactly.
Chief Lara, do you have anything else to add to that conversation around cost? And maybe cost versus traditional policing?
Yeah, I can speak from a little bit of experience. When I was in Pelican Arrows, the community safety officer program that was started, it was funded. The training was funded and provided for by the provincial Saskatchewan government, and it was up to the individual nations where those CSOs went to that they were going to be paid a salary. Some of the challenges that some of the nations have is getting that funding in place to have those CSOs paid, and sometimes you got to rob Peter to pay Paul. So some of that money was for the salaries is taken from other pots of money. So there is challenges there, and working with from my standpoint as the chief of police here for File Hills First Nations Police, is we work closely with Public Safety Canada and Saskatchewan Policing, doing budgets, forecasting, and stuff. So we need to look at what is the CSO, what is the community safety officer, what is the special constable worth in each community, and is that there's a more value in that than a boots on the street gun carrying police officer, or can we work out a combination of the needs and uniqueness of each nation? So for instance, right now we're dealing with the after effects of a quadruple homicide in Carry the Kettle First Nation that happened earlier last year.
How is that community doing right now?
Right now, we're rallying. We're developing strategies for drug trafficking, gang awareness. We're working with our partners with the Indian Head RCMP and the Regina Police Service. One of my officers is right now on training with Regina Police on how how to do a search warrant, how to talk to confidential informants, and all the paperwork that goes with that. So that's the skill that we're trying to build within our police service to address the enforcement side. And the prevention side, we're working with the chief and council, the elders group, the justice committee. So we all got to work together to combat what's going on in the community. They have drug trafficking, they have gang issues, they have underlying, substance abuse. All these things, we need to come up with a strategy together to go forward so that the people of Carry the Kettle and File Hills First Nations in general can feel safe.
I'm curious from all of your perspectives, because I mean, especially let's take drugs for instance. There's probably a lot of reasons why people sell drugs, but one of them is it's easy money, and if you don't have access to other jobs, that might be an easy way to make money quickly. How, we know that policing costs money, and you're talking about preventative. How much are you seeing those other things being done at the same time, so that people feel like they have opportunity in communities and that they don't have to turn to drugs? Or maybe I'm off base. I don't know, Eddie. What are your thoughts?
No, exactly right. It's easy money, and I think and the First Nations is really a land-based source for easy money for the drugs. And one of the things that our young people are dealing with is that factors of making good sized money, easy money, and they think that it's right. But the more that we get into this, and the more that we learn from each other, we can honestly tell you, I probably could I have my share of houses within James Smith, Peter Chapman, and J.S. Basin, as to we know the drug houses, we know the people are selling drugs, and it's just a matter of time before we were dealing with them. And in the last 6 months, we barricaded, we shut down 4 houses. We barricaded them, we shut them down, and there's 2 more coming in February that we're going to be boarding up. And that's I've asked the local RCMP to be with us during that day. So and those are things that we're but the message is slowly getting across there, and it's something that we as a First Nation have to do in order to be very proactive of what is happening to our people. And we're in a stage of cleaning that up. But you know what? I'm glad that the RCMP and our police force out there are capturing those big drug busts that are coming to our First Nations.
Amber Clark, with the superintendent with the RCMP, you're listening. I'm sure there's other things that are standing out to you. Is there anything that you wanted to add first before I ask you another question?
For sure. Certainly. And I appreciate all the comments that have been made. I think, when it comes down to drugs, it's a supply and demand type of situation, right? And I think in a lot of our smaller communities, Indigenous or not, it's just the availability of services to support, addictions, mental health, and just general health in these communities isn't there. So a lot of times enforcement's band-aiding, if you will, other social ecosystem type issues instead of dealing with root cause. But when it comes to, when we talk about detasking enforcement so that they can be targeting drugs in communities, it's those services that, the availability of those services to help people that have addictions, mental health issues, that take that away from enforcement, and then enforcement can refocus and move on to tackling, the drug trafficking and the bigger fish, if you will, in these communities to hopefully curb that.
How would you say the relationship is with RCMP, especially in detachments that are serving First Nation communities, with those communities?
I think our relationships are good, and I mean maybe Eddie can comment a little bit on it, and also Dean. From the relationships that we've forged in the collaborative approach of working with individuals, are we always on the same? Do we always agree? No, probably not. I don't know too many relationships where you're always fully in agreement with one another, but communication's key, and working at those relationships and continuing to build trust are critical in our Indigenous communities as well as all the communities that we serve. So I would say, I feel very positive about the relationships that we have, and I think that we do our best at the community level to communicate, and when we don't, I always encourage First Nation leadership to reach out to local commanders at the lowest level and address concerns locally, and if not, there's also a chain of command that they can move up if they're not happy with the service provided.
Chief Laura, you're potentially in a very unique situation to weigh in on that one too. Over the course of your 28 years with the RCMP, how did you see that relationship change between the RCMP and police, and where would you say that relationship's at now?
Well, kind of developed at a young age. When I first became a member in CAMSEC, we before things would happen, and then there would be the fallout from the rumor mill, and this was happening or that was happening, and by the time it got back to us, what the rumor was, it was escalated so much so that I thought, well, I'm going to do a search warrant. I'm going to kick in this door. I'm going to call the chief just before we kick in the door, so he knows what's going on. He knows what the issues are at play, so that he can stem those rumors and issues that come to the community level. So communication is extremely key. Having built those relationships with past chiefs and councils and leaders of communities, I can honestly say it's beyond measure. I'll give you an example. Being in charge of Fort Capel there a few years ago, got out to meet all the chiefs and councils and mayors, and so having those phone numbers given, exchanged, sometimes it was like, Jesus, guys calling me at 11:30 at night and telling me about this or that, and that went on for a couple months, and then we had a subsequent meeting, and then he says, listen, I really value your time and your effort in communicating with us. We want to invest. We want to buy our own police force, our police officer for our nation. And right now, one of these nations is benefiting from that. Those late night calls that I kind of had to endure, but that's the key. You have to invest. You have to cultivate those relationships. So at the end of the day, it enhances public safety and public confidence in the police service that's providing that service. So
I like where you're going there, because you're also starting to talk about the future of Indigenous policing in this province. You might have your finger on the pulse a little bit more than other people, but I know when I was speaking with Eddie earlier, he was talking about Manitoba and just kind of their robust Indigenous police presence there. How does Saskatchewan compare to maybe a place like Manitoba, and where do you see us moving to? Do you see more individual First Nations approaching you, hoping to start their own police services?
Well, funny you should mention that. We were invited to presentations to First Nations just before Christmas, and some of these First Nations have indicated that they want to have our police service coming over in the next couple of years. So we're seeing that change. I understand, from being a First Nations person myself, growing up on Cowes First Nation as a young child, I remember, having at that time the RCMP coming in and doing programs, coming to the schools, developing those relationships. And that's the same thing what we're trying to do with our police service. We want to have our police officers engage with the youth, interact with the elders, have that confidence instilled in them that they want to see someone that they would know that they're maybe related to, instead of strangers from outside the province or outside of Saskatchewan, in other areas of Canada where they're not familiar with a First Nations person or not familiar with the First Nations culture. So all of our officers that we hire or that we're prospectively looking at hiring all have some sort of cultural awareness or ties to the community or Indigenous themselves. So that's what we're trying to get, have that comfort level, I guess I should say, for our people to know that this person knows a little bit about them from, being a First Nations person or coming from a background in policing and First Nations. So that's the key, I think, and I think, other leaders have said it, that we want to represent the people that we look after.
Chief Laura, I really appreciate your time today. We have less than a minute left here today, so I just have to say goodbye to everybody. But I've been speaking with Eddie Head, Justice and Policing Director from James Smith, Dean Leroy, the Chief of Police for the File Hills First Nations Police Service, and Amber Clark, Superintendent in charge of Operations Safety Branch with the Saskatchewan RCMP. Thank you so much, all of you, for making time for us today and for helping our Blue Sky listeners better understand this.
Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome.